Hey, I'm your host, Dr. Desiree Cassell. I'm an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist specializing in women's health, aka pelvic floor. I'm a wife, mom of 3, foodie, lover of all things movement and nature, and I'm super passionate about educating, empowering, and supporting other women like you to find and maintain balance throughout all aspects of their lives, without pain, pressure, or peeing their pants. And this is the Balanced Momtality Podcast, where we will talk about all things pelvic floor, your core, and optimizing your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery, providing you with the knowledge and tools so that you can feel like the strong, playful, and happy mom that you and your family deserve. Now let's get you out of those pads and back to loving movement. Fill up your water, pop in those AirPods, roll out your mat, and let's connect. Before we start today's episode, just a quick disclaimer that anything mentioned in this podcast is not meant to treat or diagnose any medical conditions. If you have any questions or concerns about your healthcare needs, please seek the care of your medical provider. This is also a safe space where we will be talking about very sensitive but important topics, such as issues with peeing and pooping, relationships, and even sex. So if you have littles around, probably a good idea to pop those AirPods in. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey girl, thank you so much for showing up for another episode this week on Pelvic Floor, Core, and More with the Balanced Momtality. I have such a special guest for you today. But before I introduce her, I want to give you a little background because I don't think I've ever really given you the nitty-gritty of how I've gotten into doing the work that I do. So I have mentioned on the podcast before that I, had these issues peeing my pants for 6 years. I didn't learn until going through PT school in the gender health section of that program that was not normal and that there was a lot of things that aren't normal that we are just accepting and that there is stuff we can do for it. But that was about it, right? We're not necessarily given all of the what's, all the hows, all the don't do this, right? That's what all of the extra specialty courses and continuing ed courses are for. So at that point, I just knew, okay, so this is not normal for me to pee my pants and there is something I can do about it. But what does that actually look like, right? Like, what does restoring my core look like? What does strengthening my pelvic floor look like besides Kegels? Because I was also made aware that that might not be the answer, but that was vague, right? Like, okay, so what is? So what did I do? Well, I did what any of us do these days, and I turned to social media, specifically Instagram, right? I am searching pelvic floor exercises, just like you guys. Like, what is this? What does this look like? And I came across the wonderful Vagina Whisperer, and Dr. Sara Reardon is on my show today, and I just feel like this is such a full circle moment for me because having her platform on Instagram, being the Vagina Whisperer, if you don't know, go follow her right now. She wears a vulva costume. It's amazing. And this woman just really, reframed what pelvic floor training, pelvic floor health, what it looked like for me personally in my own body. I was able to start some of her exercises just from a couple Instagram posts, started to then get more interested in what this could look like for not only me, but for other women. And it really did kind of plant that seed for, okay, well, now I know this information and this is something I don't know enough about that I do want to know more about, right? And it really planted that seed for me to become a pelvic floor therapist myself. So again, full circle moment here. So excited to have Dr. Sara Reardon on. She is a board-certified pelvic floor physical therapist with over 18 years of experience helping individuals prevent and overcome pelvic floor issues, including urinary leakage, painful sex, prolapse, discomfort during pregnancy, postpartum, and menopause. Sara has been featured in Time, Yahoo, Harper's Bazaar, Romper, InStyle, Today, and numerous other podcasts, publications, and professional conferences. about her advocacy and educational work as a pelvic floor therapist. She is also a TED presenter on Rethinking Postpartum Care. Sara is the founder of The V-Hive, an online on-demand pelvic floor fitness platform for pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, painful sex, and pelvic floor strengthening. Sara lives in New Orleans with her husband and 2 sons, and Floored, a complete guide to women's pelvic floor health at every age and stage, is her first book and will be coming out this month. So I am so excited to have her tell you more about her journey and all of the amazing things she has done for women's health and changing that standard of care in our country, because she is a pioneer in this field. I am so thrilled to have her on. If her bio doesn't do her justice enough, hearing all the places she has been and people she has talked to, I hope hearing and listening to her story today will just inspire you and give you some encouragement to continue to help us spread the word about pelvic floor health. I loved getting to dive in a little bit more into the nitty-gritty with Sara. Having another pelvic floor PT on was just so fun, getting to talk about the taboos of this field, how it's changed, what makes a good practitioner, all of the amazing things. So such a good chat. Make sure you listen till the end and go follow Sara and check out her new book, Floored. But without further ado, let's just jump right on in. Okay, I am so excited for today's episode. I have such a special guest on the show. Um, Sara Reardon, Dr. Sara Reardon here is another pelvic floor PT that I have actually been following since before my own pelvic floor journey. So she has kind of been my initiator into getting into this world myself. So I feel like a fangirl over here getting to chat with you. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this chat for a while. And I know you have a new book and some exciting things coming out. But I want you to tell my audience a little bit about who you are, because you've been doing this for, I think, 10 years longer than me. And I don't know, longer than that. You've been doing this for a while. And so tell me your story. What got you into pelvic floor and kind of what are you doing these days?
So I have been a pelvic floor physical therapist for 18 years. I started in 2007, right after I graduated from WashU in St. Louis PT school. And during my PT school education, I had a professor who gave us like 2 to 3 weeks on what was then called women's health, is now called pelvic health. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is really interesting to just understand my own body as a woman. Although all genders have pelvic floor and we see all genders, just for myself, I was like, oh, nobody's really talking about this. And then I did a clinical rotation, which we do in PT school. And it was like 4 months and it was solely in pelvic health and women's health. And I just loved it. I mean, I loved helping other women better understand their bodies. I loved helping them kind of overcome and get better with these kind of really sensitive, often embarrassing issues like leakage or painful sex, and just to see their quality of life improve in a way that like nobody even knew they were suffering, because it's like behind their underwear, behind pants, like not talked about except behind closed doors. And then to see how well they did with therapy, it was just life changing. And I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. And so I started right after PT school. And in 2016, when I was pregnant with my second son, started my Instagram account, The Vagina Whisper, just to share some pregnancy and postpartum tips, because I feel like we know that those moms go through so many changes and are, being pregnant and giving birth is a risk factor for pelvic floor issues. And I'm like, why am I the lucky one who has this information? Like every woman should have this information. And then now, I guess, 8 years later after that Instagram post, the first post was like of lube, now it's like,
Now
I
it's
have
your
a
thing.
now I have a book coming out and I've got an online workout platform, and just, things have really evolved for me as a therapist. And it's just been awesome to see our field grow as well.
I just love it. And I think, I had a very similar coming into it moment where it was, like I was talking to you beforehand, like I found your platform. And yes, if you didn't know, she is the Vagina Whisperer on Instagram. And I was just like, who is this woman in a vulva costume? Like, this is amazing. And I just started using your exercises and I loved your messaging. And at that point, I still wasn't sold I wanted to do it for
as my practice and of specialty, until it was like, oh wow, this is changing my body and this is amazing. And I felt that same responsibility, like, okay, I know this. And of course that started me into like getting to take the other courses and learn more about it. And just that quality of life was just a whole other level, which I'm sure you can appreciate. And I think it's been so fun to watch your evolution, just because I don't know from the inside, right? But it seemed like, did you work in like and do you still work in like a typical clinic setting? Are you just doing the online platform and the book? Like, where are you at clinical wise? Because I know watching you, it seemed like you were doing it again outside in like patient care, and then you have just kind of exploded into this whole other realm, which has also helped, my own, we're stuck in is such a strict framework of like clinic care and 8 to 5, and even unfortunately maybe seeing multiple patients at once, and just seeing people like you on these platforms really branch out and take advantage of these other kind of business models. And it's been, I mean, big reason of why I've branched out and do cash based and have my own podcast and app now, because it is like, oh, we don't have to be in this box. So when did you get the brilliant idea to do all of these fun things? And have you been still doing clinical care?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's such a story. And I think from the outside in, it looks like, oh, wow, this just happened. But I mean, I've been in this field for 18 years. I feel like a dinosaur in this field, to be honest. But, I had been doing this for, 13 years, just practicing. I worked in different hospital settings and different outpatient clinics. And when I moved back to my hometown of New Orleans in 2017, after my second son, I took a year off from working, and I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to remember anything when I go back? And then I went back in 2018. I was like, oh my gosh, it feels like you never left.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2018, I worked at a hospital here for 3 months, and I had 2 babies at home. They asked me to work till 7 o'clock at night, 2 nights. And I was like, and just for patients to get scheduled was such a racket, and they had to go through central scheduling. And it was just like, this is not how I want to practice. I don't feel like I'm providing good quality care. And this is not how I want to be a mom. Like I was at a turning point where I needed more flexibility. And so I started working out of the back of a yoga studio, renting it for $30 an hour, and then eventually evolved to me opening my own cash-based clinic in New Orleans. And, after a couple of years, I hired more therapists. I hired some front office admin. During COVID, I started my online fitness workouts. And a lot of this is because of necessity. It wasn't like I had these brilliant ideas. It was something somebody asked me, like, can you see me outside of the hospital? Or I needed to leave that job because of my family. And then during COVID, it was like, hey, I can't go to my childbirth education classes. What can I do? I'm too scared to go to therapy because of COVID. So it was just like in response to the times. And in 2023, after owning my clinic for 5 years, I had 2 therapists who were working for me. And then I was contacted by an editor at my book publishing company. And she said, hey, I follow you on social media. Nobody's talking about pelvic floor health. I think you'd be great at writing a book about this. And I was like, well, that's not really on my list of things to do, but let me think about it. And at this time I had a family, a clinic, an online platform. And I was like, something has to give. I can't do all of these things. And so I actually sold my clinic. And I sold it to the 2 therapists who were working for me. And I still see patients, and I work for them now. So it's just been such a beautiful transition. And now I'm like, awesome. There's 2 new female entrepreneurs in the world. I had the time and ability to carve out to write a book, which I couldn't have done if I was in clinical care full time. And I think if anything has really been the benefit of social media and COVID is that we're able to educate people digitally now, where it didn't used to be that way in medicine. And people also have options for how they access care. It doesn't have to be just in-person clinical care. It can be telehealth sessions. It can be online programs. Now it's my book. It can be webinars. I mean, I think there's just so many ways that we can share this education and insight and help make it accessible to people and affordable. And nothing replaces in-person care, but I think it's important to give people options, and now they have them.
And that's exactly it. And I just applaud you and I appreciate you so much, because having those just again, ideas of like, oh, we don't have to live in this rigid structure of the typical therapy mill or hospital mill. And especially, I'm sure as you can agree with pelvic floor, right? Like we need more time, we need more, they have a lot more complexity, and just having that ability to reach more people, I think is so awesome because there is not enough of us. And as much as I do kind of feel like a minnow in the ocean, because of course my Instagram's full of all of you vagina whisperers. And so I feel like I'm barely making this dent and I have to just be like, no, we are all here to help and we're here to build each other up. And that's why I was so excited to have you on, just to, I think having that community of not only pelvic PTs, but then just people in your own community that then help kind of spread that word. Because these were conversations that, again, I was 6 years into peeing my pants, already going through PT school before I even found out the pelvic floor was a muscle. I'm like, what the heck? How is that even possible? Like, we need, and it was again also like, we need to know our bodies. We need to understand what is going on with our bodies and what's not normal, and that there is help out there, because so many of these topics are things that we're just accepting as normal.
Totally.
And I mean, I'm sure you hear this all the time, right? Where they come in for incontinence and you start probing with other things and they're like, oh, it's not normal to cramp really bad, like the whole week of my cycle. Oh, it's not normal to have pain with it. Like all these things where it's like, no, it's not. And those stories just keep reiterating why we do the work that we do.
Yeah.
And
I think what you're saying, Desiree, is really important, because I think like I never set out to be this like Instagram star or influencer or author. I think, well, I will say is I always come back to my North Star, and my North Star is like, how do we make this care more accessible, and how do we continue to help women and help lead them to the care that they deserve, because they deserve this and they're getting left behind and it's not fair. And we can do better. And so I feel like we have to be the voices to advocate for them. But I'm very aware, like Instagram could go away tomorrow. And I'm like, I still have to have a great family, a great friends, my health, a business. So regardless of the number of followers you have or Instagram likes, like you can't have that be your North Star, because you can be an Instagram influencer for cooking or kids' toys. Like, no, you do this because you love the work and you love the patients and you love the results. And you, to almost like rely on these platforms, I almost feel like I have to rely on these platforms more because that's where so much of my audience is. But if you don't have to get stuck in that cycle, then I'm like, don't. Like, you build your community where you are, whether it's online or, in your town. But I just think that this is one marketing channel. It's not the only one. And so I just really encourage therapists and moms to like not get stuck in, I'm such a minnow, but I'm like, no, you're a shark. Like, you are a shark. You are doing good work. You are helping so many people. And like, don't ever lose sight of that.
Well, I appreciate that because, yeah, I think that social media can have a place, obviously, right? I think that there are some pros to it where it's helping us spread the word. I think that a lot of women are starting to hear about pelvic floor, know it exists, know there's this thing called pelvic floor PT that can help, which has helped so many women advocate for themselves and find that level of care, which has been really nice. But then there's also that, confusing, too much overload of different things on social media. So it's definitely got its pros and cons like anything else. And but I love that there's practitioners like you there who are giving very valid and scientific based information and really practical tools. And it's just so helpful. And I'm sure it gives people a taste of what your book is about. But I do want to know, like, what overall, is it just like a general pelvic floor 101 book? Is this like I've got this symptom, so go to this page book? Like, what is the book about? Tell us all about Floored.
It's all of the above. So this is the cover here, and it's a woman's guide to pelvic floor health at every age and stage. And when I decided to write the book, it was like I had to make a decision of like, what do I want to address? Do I want to go into birth? Do I want to go into menopause? And I said, I just want to start from the basics. Like, I feel like there aren't a lot of books, if any, that just go through everything. And I kind of focused on the first few chapters or 101. Like, what does this muscle do? What's this part of your body? I made the language very non-medical. Like, I talk about the anatomy and stuff, but there's a chapter called The Scoop on Poop, and so I'm like, I try to really speak in a way that's not so clinical but also give you clinical tips and pearls and education so that you can start things at home if you'd like as well. And then the book is broken into like chapters on peeing, pooping, and sex. And the reason for that was because those are kind of three areas that I think that we aren't taught the normal. And we aren't taught like the proper way to pee, the proper way to poop. If you're experiencing these issues, like what are some things you can start doing at home? When should I go see a physical therapist? How do I know if I need strengthening or lengthening? And then I went into life stages, into menstruation, and then pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, and then menopause. And so I really kind of just took these chapters and broke down like, how is your pelvic floor affected? There are gobs of books on menopause, and I don't talk about, wearing a weighted vest or osteoporosis. I talk about your pelvic floor during this phase of life. And so I'm really specific into what it addresses, but I think that there's so much information that we're just not getting. And one of the questions I get a lot is like, when do we need to start teaching young women about this part of their body? I'm like, from when they're babies, like when kids are learning to potty train and teaching them how to sit on the toilet properly with their feet supported, like giving them a straw to blow through to help bear down, not going pee just in case all the time. And then when they get their periods, like pain is not normal for a period, how to use menstrual hygiene products, and then becoming sexually active, and then obviously pregnancy, postpartum, and then into menopause. I think every stage of life, our pelvic floor requires something different. And I think the narrative has always been like, either just deal with it or like, oh, that's normal for pregnancy, that's normal for aging, when really there's so much proactive care that can be done and care to address issues you might be experiencing. So there's also a lot of patient stories in there. There's a ton of research. Like I hired a research assistant to back up everything I was doing and to make sure that I'm giving out the right information. Like I wanted to make sure things were really up to date. And so it's just kind of this lovely mix of like helping people feel seen and heard and not alone, but also giving them guidance for how they can care for their bodies at home.
I love that. I think that that's amazing because this is, you've probably gotten this. I was like floored, we'll say, when I had a patient come in, a woman, born female, that didn't know she had 3 holes, and she was in her mid 40s, like this was just very like, what? Like we have to go that far back. We're that disconnected from our own body. And I love that you say like, when do we start this? Because that's like, when do I start pelvic PT? When do we start having these conversations? The sooner the better, right? Like the sooner the better, because that way we can be proactive going into these situations and then helping raise kids and women that, and yes, men have pelvic floors, but I think I've heard you say too, I'm definitely more woman's pelvic floor, women's health than male. I don't treat male pelvic floor. I know men have a pelvic floor, but I think there's not enough out there for us women that this was something I really just kind of niched myself into women's health care. But even, men's health, I think I'll even have women ask about their husbands. And I'm like, yeah, that's not normal. Go send them to this person, right? Like I can refer to that support, but I think just knowing that these things aren't normal is so crucial, because then we can be proactive and not be living with leaking that then turns into tailbone pain, that then turns into pain with intercourse, that just that cycle that we get so caught up in taking all the layers back when we could really just be, oh, you've got one little dribble with a sneeze, we can get on top of that before it compounds. And because I'll even get runners that are like, oh, I've been leaking since cross country in high school, and it's like, yeah, I also have a big passion. I want to get into my community here and get into the high schools. And I am kind of also like, when's the perfect time? Because I think middle school, like if I could get into the middle schools and talk about anatomy even, I think that would be helpful. But I think the whole pelvic health thing gets a little taboo, it's like,
oh, totally.
Oh, but then we're talking about, sexual function and normalizing that, and that gets really taboo in schools. And so I've already been told that they don't really want me in there. And so I'm like, okay, who else can I talk to and how can I get in there? Because that is just even more of a red flag that I need to be in there more.
No, it's true. I mean, and it's depending on which school you go to and what part of the country you're in as to where you start getting information. I think one of the important things, though, is that like if we can't integrate this on the broad scale of like middle school and high school education, then like at least the parents have to know. Like you have to understand your body so that you can educate the next generation. And I think that, it's still very commonplace to use these like kind of kitschy, funny names for our body parts. And when a question comes up about, the vagina or penis or sex, it's like, oh, we don't talk about that. But what happens is that when we don't talk about them, then when a problem arises, we either one, don't know where to get help, two, we don't know what's normal. And so we just endure it. And three, then it's like you're suffering because you're told like this is a part of your body to be ashamed of or embarrassed of or doesn't deserve to even have a conversation about, let alone get care. And so I don't even think it's like one conversation. I think it's trickling it in over time. And unfortunately, we as women don't get this education until we already have a problem. And the goal would at least be to like have it on the radars of high school coaches, of pediatricians, of parents, so that they can crack the door open. If we can't go to school, then they can at least crack the door open to like, hey, could be a pelvic floor issue. Let's go seek some support.
Yeah. And I would be curious because you are in New Orleans. So how has that culture, and I've never been, so I'm going to have to come visit you someday and come to New Orleans. It's on my bucket list.
It's such a fun town.
Yeah, it's on my husband. Of course, we want to go around Mardi Gras. Like, we want to go when it's all fun. My sister was actually just there doing a nursing travel residency around Mardi Gras. And yeah, she was like, it's so fun. So it's on my list. I'll let you know when I come to town.
Please.
But the culture down there, I'm assuming I'm up in northern New Mexico, which is definitely its own little rural area. But I think we're a little island because the Los Alamos National Labs are here. So think Oppenheimer, and there's a lot of PhDs from all over the world. So even though it's a very rural northern part of New Mexico, there's the highest millionaires per capita here. We've got a ton of PhD educated, wealthy people here. And there's still this like taboo around these topics. And I'm curious, like where you are, has that changed? Like, are you seeing a little bit more, or I guess like less apprehension to like coming to see you and more people coming firsthand as opposed to like, oh, well, I got told about this a few times, but I just really didn't want to, there's like this resistance and this taboo about, because it's talking about our vagina and these parts of our body that we've really just been like, wait, you just said that word? My daughter even, right? Like, I'm like, no, it's a vagina. And she's like, la, 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 la. I'm like, no, okay. I don't want to be too overly pushy, but also let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my son's over there like, look at my penis. I'm like, this is the difference. Like, we as women need to be okay with this. Men have been okay with it. Like, they've been calling it a penis forever. And we need to be okay with our bodies and talking about it. And I think culturally, that is something to take into consideration. But I'm curious, even just in the last 10, 20 years, like, have you seen an evolution and a change? Do we still have a lot of work? I think we still have work to do, but I'm
oh my gosh, we have so much work to do. All of my career has been in the South. So I was in Austin and Dallas for 10 years, and I've been in New Orleans for 8. And so I kind of only know this. I will say in Austin, I had an amazing boss and mentor who, really was a pioneer in this field too. And then went on to work at an incredible academic institution in Dallas that they were on the forefront. They had a pelvic floor group, and we met with physicians, and we had monthly meetings, and we had symposiums, and it was just such a progressive, inclusive group for therapists. So I really feel like those two experiences kind of help lay the foundation for like, oh, this is how this care can be practiced. And so when I moved here to New Orleans, I will say I felt like we were very far behind. Like there was like 1 or 2 hospitals with pelvic floor therapists. There were no private practices doing solely pelvic floor therapy. And so it was definitely ripe for progress. But New Orleans is a very progressive town in itself. We're like a little blue dot in a red state. But all of the South is everywhere in the deep South is, but every corner of the US right now is, I think, more conservative than potentially it used to be. So I can't say that being down here has affected the ability to like say the word vagina or talk about the pelvic floor. I think the healthcare in Louisiana is behind in general. And I think if anything, it's more of a push to be like, okay, no, we need to work harder to support the women and moms in this state than if I was in somewhere else. But I will say that there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, this is a global problem, but particularly a nationwide problem. Like, we don't have the infrastructure to support women in healthcare. If anything, women are losing rights left and right, day to day in, states across the US.
Mhm.
And we are, not caring for moms. And we have the highest maternal mortality rate in any developed country. And moms just get really crappy care in the US. And so I think that there's just a lot to be done in general to improve women's health care, and particularly pelvic floor care. And it's a nationwide problem, but I will say, like, the needle's moving, and I don't know if it'll ever be where my dream would be, but I think that, 5 years ago, I wasn't able to say the word vagina on a news broadcast because they felt like, our audience isn't going to be comfortable with that. But then I was recently on our local news in the local paper, and now have a book coming out with a juicy grapefruit on the front, So I'm like, we're moving in the right direction, and social media has allowed us to like go beyond our local communities and get this word out. And so, yeah, but there's still like a lot of work to be done. I still meet people all the time. They're like, I've never heard of this, or I don't know if there's a pelvic, like, I didn't know there was a pelvic floor. So, it's still kind of new to some people, but it's really not new in the pelvic floor world.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, who knows if we'll ever get to that point. But I think, because of books like yours putting on shelves, because not even everyone has social media, right? Like, so
Right.
getting this where it's just in people's faces going, oh, what's that? Like, let's read about it. Let's look into it. And then like today I had an eval right before this interview of one of my patient's neighbors. Like, she was like, I've never heard about this, but my neighbor's been seeing you. So she told
Yes.
me, and it's like, we're just spreading the word
And that's
slowly that
amazing. I feel like people are singing about pelvic floor therapy from the rooftops, and it's women who were saying no to their friends, go get this. She's amazing. You deserve this. And we need that. It's those ripple effects that are helping get women better care. And so, we just continue to need more therapists to meet that demand. And so it's really beautiful to see this, because again, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about this, and now we are. And that just means more people can get access to care.
Yeah, I'd be curious since you've been practicing for so long, because even just the last 7 years that I've been doing this, I've seen already certain things that we were taught, with that intro level pelvic floor course that are now kind of like, not how we want to do things. So I'd be curious, just more in a clinical approach. This is, I guess, more for me than my listeners, but might be interesting for them to know, like, what are some of the things that maybe you used to do treatment wise, or how you used to view things in the pelvic floor, or how you used to approach it that aren't the same anymore?
Yeah, I think I used to use a lot more biofeedback in the early days. I used to use a lot of biofeedback, and which is like these little sensors you can hook up intravaginally or externally around the anus to help people see it on a screen. And now there's devices that folks can get at home and kind of do that at home. So sometimes I'll have them bring them in and we'll work with it in the clinic, but I don't spend my clinical time with them doing that. There are so many more tools and devices they can use. I mean, when I first started practicing, I had a woman shaving down the end of a candlestick to use it as a vaginal dilator. And now you can have all kinds of dilators: plastic, metal, silicone, different sizes, different colors. I mean, there's just so many more options for home tools now. I think it's incredible. And there's just so many more options for everything, for like lubricant, for wands. But I also see other modalities coming in, like shockwave and infrared therapy, and different types of therapies that can be used in conjunction with just manual therapy and exercise. To be honest, like I think that every therapist treats a little bit differently. I always tend to be a little bit more of a hands-on therapist, and I do some exercise and things like that. But I think, the basics of what we're doing is we're really helping people better understand their bodies. We're teaching them kind of what's normal, what's not. If it's muscles that need work, we're kind of looking at how their muscle is functioning and then incorporating that, addressing those particular muscular issues. I do a lot more, I would say, into exercise and function now. Like it used to be like lay on your bed and do Kegels. And now I'm like, no, let's like pull into squats, pull it into lunges, pull it into like weighted stuff, you know? So there's just different ways, I think, as my body is evolving. Like I also start to just use my own personal experience to kind of bring that into how I'm practicing care as well. And there's a lot more proactive care. I mean, we have a ton of women coming in for childbirth preparation, where that didn't used to be the case. And now we're seeing women like 6 weeks postpartum as pretty standard. And that didn't used to be the case. I'm much more, I think, vocal about different like types of medications they need to ask for, or like things to try. Where it's be like, we can't say to like take, you know, Miralax. And I'm like, no. If this person is constipated and they can't get in, like, I'm like, take the stool softener. I'm just much more like, no, this falls into the realm of pelvic health and I feel confident making this recommendation kind of thing.
Yeah, I love to hear that because that sounds very similar to me. And I haven't obviously been practicing as long as you, but I feel like I got just a blip when I first started of the red light Kegel exercises, you know, like, oh, we're going to just sit at the light and do the Kegel exercises. And that was kind of all it was. It was like strength training, do these reps, do these sets, Kegel away. And then I had a hard time with that, like immediately, because I was just like, this doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't work together. And then I think it was Sarah Duvall's course. And there was a couple other things where I was like, okay, like this is more how I view it and how it should work together and bringing it into that more functional system. So I don't know if I just came into it at the right point or what, but I feel like I've been able to just kind of carry on with that more like functional approach, whole body. And really, you know, like you said, we are doctors, we are the specialists in this area. And I also have gotten a little bit more like, no, take the magnesium citrate.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
exactly.
great.
And one of the things too is, you know, I have more patients going in for surgery now, and I'm seeing them before surgery and after surgery. I think before it would be like PT, 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 PT. And I'm like, no, if we've done PT and you've done all that you can, and you're still experiencing significant prolapse or any prolapse that's bothering you or a DRA that's bothering you, like go get the surgery. And like, I'm supporting you before, I want to see you after. Like, so I think it's just more kind of individualizing it. And it used to be like surgery's so bad. I'm like, no, if this helps improve someone's function and quality of life, then like, I'm all for it. And we're just going to kind of sandwich it between therapy to make sure that you get optimal results and longevity from that surgery. And so it's not as much of like shaming people into be like, oh, you don't need surgery. I'm like, no, if that's what you need, and like more use of pessaries for internal support and internal devices. So just thinking that we're not like the end all be all for everybody, but we're one piece of the puzzle, and we have to meet patients where they are and kind of be their guide and support them in whatever decisions they make.
It's so true. I've had my own like patient humbling experiences this last year where I got diagnosed with pelvic venous disorder and ended up needing my own iliac vein stent placed. And I had this such struggle of, oh, if I get surgery, I'm failing, right? And I even had like a physiological thing wrong, but because in PT school and even going through the pelvic health stuff, they really then called it pelvic congestion syndrome, really did kind of just say red herring, like, don't worry about that. And then here I was diagnosed with it, having pain, having all of these issues, trying the strategies I would normally do and failing and feeling like a failure myself.
Yeah.
And then being like, what do I do? Like, I'm so stuck here. And if it wasn't for me finding another pelvic PT that really specialized it and really was like, no, like, get the surgery. Like
Totally.
I had it, got the surgery, life-changing. And then I did. And I was like, well, duh, like there's stuff that is physiologically wrong. And I felt the same about prolapse because we were also taught going into PT school, like, oh, pessaries are there just in case. Like surgery is there if you really need it, which means you kind of failed at all of the other things. And then again, after taking Taryn Holmes' course last year, I'm like, lies. Like this is not how we're
exactly.
taught. Like, and then even, Taryn Holmes was so like Australia was 10 years behind. You guys are 20 years behind on
I
the
know.
research. And it's so frustrating that even if we are being taught things at one time, that research is even then like 10 years old. I'm like, what is happening that even the new providers coming out aren't being updated on research that was 20 years from now? Like, that is not good care. And so it is just, I think, like one provider at a time, spreading the word, trying to elevate that standard of care, and advocate and convince our patients to advocate for themselves to really seek that level of care, because your providers unfortunately don't know all, just like we don't know all, right?
I do
But
not
it
know
is like,
all. And I'll say that all the time.
we need
Like,
to go.
I'll post something and somebody's like, that's outdated. I'm like, well, darn, I didn't know that. Like, I'm learning all the time. I go to continuing ed courses. They're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, learning. I'm like everybody else, like I'm behind and trying to stay ahead. And so I am no different. And I think that that's important. And I also think it's important to be open. Like, I'll have people come to me with ideas or things like that. I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. Or, I think it's important in our field just to not shame other people. So we can all do it differently. We may all have different perspectives, and we aren't all the experts in everything. But I think that it's often like, well, if you don't do hyperpressives, then you're not getting your patient the best. And if you don't do red light there, I'm like, listen, it is like, we're all different. That's like, medicine is an art. And if I'm not the best therapist for someone, like, I'm like, oh, by all means, like, please go find somebody else, get a second opinion. Like, it has to be a fit. And it's never about like me and my ego and like what I provide. It's much more of like, how do I make sure that you get the care that you need and deserve? And it's not from me, then I'm going to help you find the person who can give it. But I think sometimes it feels a little bit like we're thinking like there's only one way to do things, and there's not. And I think that that's the beauty of medicine, and of how we practice, is we don't need 30 Sarahs or 20 Desirees. It's like everybody's got their own spin, and I think, but one of the things I will say is that over the past, 5 to 7 years, like a lot of the in-person pelvic floor courses have all been virtual. And so we're getting a lot of therapists in the world who haven't taken in-person courses. And I'm like, these are the therapists who I want to work with. And because there's little things that I think you learn with experience and with more patient care that like make a big difference for, like, it could be how you hold your hand, what side you're treating the patient from, how the sheet is draped, how we're addressing them, that really just, they come with time and experience, but it also just helps the patient experience be so much more comfortable. And it doesn't matter how good of a practitioner you are. Like, if you can't make your patient feel safe and comfortable and connect with them and communicate with them, then like we're only doing half the work. Like, the other part is just like getting them to feel safe coming in, and to trust you. And so I think it's more than like, I don't think I'm the best therapist. I think I'm a good listener, and I think that I am willing to try different things and stay open. But I just think that healthcare is much more than just like the treatment protocols on the paper. It's just really like caring for that person and making it individualized and making them feel like they're the most important person in the room, because they are.
That's so good, because again, I didn't tell you this, but I have had no mentors. I've just gone through the courses I've gone through. I got thrown into an outpatient clinic that wanted a women's health therapist, so they paid for me to go do all the certifications and everything. But I was just learning from the courses, but then in person, it was just me. So I've always kind of had this level of imposter syndrome, especially when I started my own practice, thinking, who am I starting my own practice when I've only been doing this for like a few years? And even there, I didn't have someone guiding me and mentoring me. Like, I have a few people in the community I'd reach out to, but I didn't have that, care and mentorship that I really wish I could have had. But I still just felt like, well, I can help this person better than that person, so I might as well go do my best. And it has just been such a learning experience being in this setting and having be that provider that many times, the patient saying, you're the first person who's listened to my story. Like, they haven't even gotten on the table. We haven't looked at anything yet. And they already just feel like this was worth it. Like, you get it just by hearing me and talking to me, you get it. And that's all they need sometimes, is just to feel like they're not this crazy person with negative test results that aren't explaining their chronic pain.
Totally. And I think
And
that it's so rare in medicine now to like actually have somebody sit down. And that's always been the luxury of our field is like one-on-one patient care time. And it's like a gift to have that with patients, you know, and just to really understand like what their needs are. And so, I mean, you do have to be clinically trained, but I think it's much more than and you also are a hungry learner. Like you never stop, you know? So it's just like you said, I took Taryn's course and I did Sarah's course. It's like, I think you just kind of keep absorbing those things. And that's what helps us keep growing as clinicians and evolving over time. But I think what I, you know, having been on the, as a patient, you see, like if I walk into a clinic and the receptionist doesn't even look up to see me or they don't return my calls, I'm like, those are just things that I'm like, that's part of the experience as a patient. It's not just their time in my room. It's from when they call, they reach out, they schedule, like the barriers we can take down for them to kind of get in. Like everybody who emails me, I email them back personally. Like I don't care how many followers I have. If you email me about like an exercise in my program, like I'll respond because it's just like we lose that personal touch and that's what helps us feel cared for. And I think that it's hard. It's a lot to keep up with, but it's also very necessary. And so I always think like people are investing a lot in when we're asking them to come in, like we got to deliver, you know? And so it's not just the continuing education part, but the whole experience that we can provide for them. I'm like super passionate about that.
Yeah, and it is. It really does make or break it. And they're these people that have been to a point that they have put it off and put it off and put it off. They're probably in a bunch of pain. They don't want to talk about this. This is embarrassing. And if they're finally making the decision to come into you, you have to show them that same respect and consideration. And, you know, I'm a one-woman show. I am doing everything on my end over here to the point where I am like, I need help. And it's kind of like, I don't want to let go of some of those things because like the phone calls, for example, like, yes, it'd be really nice to not be the one returning phone calls, answering the phone, calls back. It's a lot of time sucking nonsense for me. But I also will call a patient back and they're like, wait, this is Dr. Desiree herself? Like, oh, hi. And they're just really happy that they're like, oh, well, I even had a lady this week actually say, oh, you called me back so promptly and I'm talking to you already. I'm already sold. Book me. I'm like, cool, okay. So it does go to show those little things do make a big difference. And again, I applaud you. I am so grateful for you. And I am so glad we got to chat today. And I know we could chat forever. I am going to have to come down to New Orleans sometime and actually maybe get some hands-on learning from you someday. That would be awesome.
I know. You know, I really want to get back into teaching in person. That's been, I have like we do some professional teaching through Pelvic Floor University with one of my colleagues, Jessica Real, but I love the in-person teaching. Like I really love it. And so, you know, after my husband's like, what are you going to do after the book? And I was like, nap for like 2 months. And then I'm making an app for my workouts. And then I'm like, you know, I'll see where the river brings me. All of this has just really been kind of following the path and trying to juggle motherhood and entrepreneurship and, you know, being a practitioner. So, you know, we will see. And but I think more than anything, I'm just really thrilled to see more people like you who are just sharing these experiences and messages and education in just so many different ways. And I'm always like, we help one person and that's a success, you know? And so I just love that you're doing this and really glad that you're in this field and helping so many people.
Oh, well, thank you. Like I said, I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for you. So I am super grateful. And we will definitely have to chat again soon. I know you've got to get going soon, Sarah, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do just want you to let my listeners know a little bit more about where they can find you. When does your book come out? Where can they find that? All that good stuff.
So I'm on Instagram as the Vagina Whisperer, the.vagina.whisper. You can follow along, get tons of pelvic floor tips and, you know, just some other mom stuff. And then I'm on TikTok as the Vag Whisperer because TikTok doesn't like the word vagina. And then my book, Floored, A Woman's Guide to Pelvic Floor Health at Every Age and Stage, comes out on June 10th. So depending on when you're listening to this, it's available. And my website is thevaginawhisper.com where you can check out my blogs. And I've got a ton of free guides and workouts and more info in the book, and just really like a place to just kind of go down the rabbit holes of like anything you're interested in. And, you know, hopefully if you feel like you need care, you're able to work with a great practitioner like you or pick up the book or, you know, start your journey to healing.
I love that. I can't wait to get my book in the mail and check it out because I love absorbing all of this stuff. And I think it's going to be an amazing resource for women everywhere. So thank you so much for spending the time to do that book because, man, that is definitely a feat I don't think I will ever do. There's some things where I'm like, writing a book, that's like as far away from my natural tendencies. I'm like, there's no way.
You never know. I said I'd never own a clinic, and then look what happened. So we'll see, Desiree. It might happen in the future.
That's true. I actually said I would never own a clinic. Already do that. Said I would never do a podcast. Already doing that.
There I
guess you're right. Who knows? But I just want to say thank you. Keep doing the work you're doing. You're reaching so many people and you're inspiring so many clinicians. So I really do appreciate you. And I would love to stay in touch, but I will let you go. I hope you have a great afternoon. And listeners, please go check out her book coming out, Floored. It's going to be amazing. Tell all your moms, your sisters, your friends, your wives, tell all the women in your life so that we can help spread this information. This is stuff every woman needs to know.
Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got so many other important things going on, but I hope it was helpful and you leave here with some tools to help you in your healing journey. And I just want to ask you, if you have found this helpful, to please leave a review on iTunes. Scroll down to the bottom of my podcast page and leave that 5-star review so it can help other women see this information. And also, if you want to be a part of my community of amazing women trying to balance all the things, great tips and insight and sharing stories and just motivating each other along the way, feel free to join my Facebook group, The Balanced Momtality, Wellness and Support. I hope to see you here next time on the Balanced Momtality Podcast.